Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sprint 236 review. This was a normal 2-week sprint. Let's get started. I'll start with the overview, Jeffrey on the UI, Adam on providers, Joe on the platform, and Keenan on the API. As you can see, it was a pretty typical sprint with 126 PRs merged this sprint and spread pretty evenly between bugs, enhancements, and tests. And over to Jeffrey on the UI.
Thanks, Jason. So in Sprint 236, a total of 13 PRs got merged into the UI Classic repo, out of which 2 are bugs, 4 are enhancement, and 7 are for fixing JS test cases. I can explain about them in the following slides. Gilbert fixed a bug in the settings schedule summary page. The value for request under the object details block was printing the same value as of the message. This was because the wrong attribute was being used here, and Gilbert had fixed it by providing the correct one. Next slide. This PR is from Jason removing the require lines from the classic spec-helper.rb, since this is being loaded first from the core's spec helper. And removing these lines from the classic also fixes the cross report test for 3.0. Next slide. We added a search bar to the provisioning instance and virtual machine pages. Earlier, there was a hide deprecator checkbox written in Ruby code, and we removed it and then moved it to a new React component. We also added the same search bar inside this component. The virtual machine page did not have any kind of filters before. And since both these pages were rendered from the same partial file, we reuse the same React filter component on both these modules. Next slide. We also enhanced the tag selection style, which is seen under the purpose tab of the virtual machine, publish virtual machine page. We reuse the same class name of which its style was already defined in a few other pages before. Next slide. This PR is from Jay Carmen, adding the description to the OS info summary pages. So if an OS name attribute is not null, then he displayed this info in the UI as description. Next slide. We managed to fix 7 test case warnings that are associated with React components. These components are physical storage form, copy catalog form, service dialog form, OT, host initiator group form, ProGrid, tree selectors, and MIQ structured list sub. And that's all from the UI side. Over to Adam for providers.
Thanks, Jeffrey. For providers this sprint, in documentation, we added a guide for using provider VCRs for using EMS refresh to populate a database for development purposes. So if you don't have access to a provider, but you need to work with the inventory from one of these providers, this guide shows you essentially how to use the pre-recorded VCRs to populate your database with that inventory. For core this sprint, Nasser made a change to the automation manager credentials. The previous method was essentially hard coding all of the possible options, and he made this pluggable by going through the descendants to pick up the automation credential types. We also removed the the Ansible playbook catalog type from the base embedded automation manager class. This was fallout from the original expectation that embedded automation manager was essentially equal to embedded Ansible, but now that we're adding more embedded automation types, this is no longer true. So we moved this down to the embedded Ansible automation manager class so that we can enable catalog support for embedded Terraform and workflows. For Google, we had a dependency, an implicit dependency on RBNACL, which is used for the tokens. The gem was being included by Appliance Console, but was also being used by Google, so we figured we would make it an explicit dependency there, since we might remove it from Appliance Console in the future. For PowerVC, Jay improved the parsing for operating systems to drop the specific version for VMs directly into the operating system payload, so it doesn't have to be figured out dynamically. We have the full version info, so we added that directly to the OS version column. this is what's being shown on the UI that Jeffrey just talked about. And next slide. And a lot of work for embedded Terraform. So we added the pluggable UI, menu items, list views, and detail views for repositories, credentials, and Terraform templates. Gilbert added a couple of columns to the template and repository list view to improve the list there so that we're also showing the repository branch name. So if you have multiple repository branches added, you'll be able to see which branch a particular template record is coming from. Manoj added template credentials for a number of the Terraform providers like VMware, Amazon Azure, etc. These will be used in the future for service provisioning. So when you're picking credentials for a particular provider, you would create these types. We added orchestration stacks and a job-based state machine, which are used when ordering a Terraform template. So the orchestration stack tracks whatever gets created by that Terraform template, and the job state machine orchestrates running the Terraform template. So it kicks it off and then checks the status to see if it's complete. Manoj also added an API client called Terraform Runner that interfaces with the containerized OpenTofu API. And so this is what's being used to kick off the stack creation and track the progress. Gilbert fixed an issue with the repository refresh button not doing anything. And lastly, Joe improved the Terraform Runner available method by using the ping API endpoint as opposed to getting a list of stacks. And that is it for providers. Over to Joe.
Thanks, Adam. For platform enhancements and improvements, Keenan updated the cross-repo tests to use Ruby 3.1. He also made a small code improvement to use hash fetch instead of key ? Jason added the missing object source CSP directive, since some scanners were explicitly looking for these fields. Brandon added the ability to manually run the monolithic container on demand from within ManageIQ repo. He also added an appliance smoke test script, and he further improved it with CentOS Stream 9 hosts. He also added a CRD field for the SSL verify option to replace an existing TLS configuration setting, and he defaulted it to verify SSL. Next slide, please. For platform bugs, Jason fixed an issue where we had to downgrade SQLite 3 to versions less than 2, and that was to maintain compatibility with Active Record 6.1. Jeffrey added a referrer policy to the secure headers to resolve a dynamic scan issue. Keenan fixed our supports helper as we were incorrectly stubbing code we were actually wanting to test. Adam fixed a bug where IE10N wasn't correctly loaded for the appliance console, and that was leading to an error when we tried to print a string that was marked for translation. Adam also fixed an issue where we were trying to start our systemd service each step after you configure both the database and messaging, and he changed it to instead do it once after both have been done. Adam fixed an issue in the cross repo tool where the Node.js repos were failing because we were trying to run both bin setup and npm install. And Brandon removed the temporary lockdown of Ruby to Ruby 3.1.2, now that both UBI 9 and CentOS Stream 9 both have version 3.1.4. Next slide, onto the API.
Hello all. So we have some enhancements, a little bit of refactoring. Nassar added the pluggability. Sorry, this is 2 weeks old, but he added credential types for pluggability in the core, and then he moved that over to the API as well. I added the ability to have metrics rollups for a particular provider. For UI, I had requested that. And then refactoring the supports mixin, we just like the supports entry, the stubbing that Joe mentioned, we moved around the way, our stubs work so that our tests will exercise more classes. And then the get index, we before didn't necessarily access having a week, sorry. So we didn't do a good job with fetching classes from the UI over the API. Sometimes we would not get child classes. So we just added a test in there to show how to fetch all subclasses. On to Jason.
All right, and that's all for our Sprint 236 review. Our next Sprint 237 review will be on May 15th at the usual place and time. And I'd like to thank all the presenters today, all the contributors to Manage IQ, and all those bringing up those great discussions. Keep it up. Thanks, everyone.